Fighting in armor? Don't be a fool. Get yourself the medieval multi-tool. With many ways to hurt your foe, it's the go-to weapon for those in the know. Today, we're going to talk about the Pollaxe. Oh, hello again, friends. Lauren back with you, and today, a video that I've been wanting to make for some time, and I can finally do it. We're going to talk about the medieval Pollaxe. Whether you spell it P-O-L-L-A-X-E or P-O-L-E-A-X-E, doesn't matter. We're talking about a variety of weapon implements attached to a haft. Now, it took some time for me to get all the pieces assembled, but I finally got it done. Finally have the edges routed. We'll talk a bit about the design. Of course, I'm wearing some armor. The gorget didn't want to quite clip in today, and I got frustrated, so should have a little bit more armor on, but I wore the mail, got my kettle helm. You can still see me, you can still hear me. Yeah, it's pretty good. So, wearing some armor, because we're talking about a weapon that's very good at fighting people in armor. That's what the Pollaxe does. Okay, so do we have information from history about how to use this weapon and all about it? Absolutely. Do we have information in Fiore? Yes. Do we have information in Telhofer? Yes. Faulkner? Call? Yes. And of course, the most famous of all amongst the HEMA community, Le Jeu de la Hache, or Play of the Axe. And this book from Jason Smith, Burgundian Pollaxe, has lots of great information about it. It has the original French, it has an English translation, and then it has an interpretation, plus lots of good photos. So it's been about 5 years since I did any Pollaxe. This book has been pretty helpful in getting me to remember all of the details, because I can give you some basics, but I want to make sure that I've got at least someone's interpretation, plus the original information. That helps me convey accurate information to you. So, Burgundian Pollaxe. Now, why is it Burgundian Pollaxe? Well, Jeu de la Hache, as a manual, it doesn't have an author, but we know that it's from Burgundy, an area often in conflict with the kings of France, even though it's French, and it's part of France now. But the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good, hired a master, Ambrose of Milan, to come and teach axe. And Ambrose was paid quite well. So we have a pretty good assertion that Ambrose was the one who at least was behind the manual. It's his teachings, because he was there about 1440 teaching Pollaxe to the king and his followers. So it makes a good 15th century resource. Now, this is just one style of Pollaxe. There are others. Of course, it's a synthetic, because for training purposes, you don't need a real Pollaxe. So yeah, polythermal material. It's a little springy, so you can still bruise someone pretty badly with this. You still have to be careful if you're training with Pollaxe. But we'll go over the different parts and pieces, talk about a few different designs that Pollaxes have, and then a little bit about how you actually fight with one. Now, they're excellent for fighting people in armor. It's pretty good against unarmored people too, because if you don't have armor, there's a lot of nasty bits going on that can hurt someone. So let's start with the head of the Pollaxe. We could call it the mail, M-A-I-L, which is not M-A-I-L-L-E. Remember, we're using French terms here. So this is the hache. Hache means axe. Hache is hatchet. Think about that. Okay, so that's the axe blade. We have the mail, the hammer, the maul, and you'll notice that it has this waffle pattern. So it's not just a blunt crunching, it's really going to dig in at all these points and really spread that force. Really good at crunching armor. With a flat blade on your Pollaxe, that can still kind of dent into armor as well, especially if you had big pauldrons on. As we see developing more and more in the 15th century, we're going to be able to hack into, crunch this armor. We need to dent it, we need to constrict the person. So if the armor is all crunched up and you can't move so well, you can't fight so well, and if you can't fight so well, you're probably going to lose. And of course, getting past armor means thrusting to the gaps under the arms. I'm not wearing my gorget, so this is a prime target. I would definitely want armor here. Like I said, I was just frustrated putting it on. It's like, nah, don't need it for recording a video. I'm not actually fighting anyone. Smacking into someone's head, sure, but thrusting to the gaps that has the dag, which means dagger in French, although it's just a top spike. But, you know, it reminds us a little bit of how a rondel dagger works. We'll talk about a rondel dagger in a second in connection. Okay, so, hache, mail, dag. It could also be that the mail, the hammer end, you could also have a beak, a little slightly curved spike called the bec, and it looks like a crow's beak, right? So it could be, or, you know, a falcon's beak, so bec de falcon could be a term used for these. But there we go. So we have multiple ways of attacking the opponent. We can cut into light armored sections or unarmored sections, or even with this flat edge, just crunch into certain large pieces of armor. We can hammer and dent and bang and crunch and try and break the armor. We can thrust through the gaps. Poorly made armor, probably you could thrust through, or a particularly thin spot, maybe. There are some manuscript images that do show weapons going through armor, but more likely, and what the manual is telling us to do, is to thrust for the gaps, thrust for the places that are less armored, that are easier to get into. We need to have a gap under the arm for mobility purposes. That's a good target. Okay, now we have languettes that helps to secure the head to the haft, plus it's extra protection. If you're dealing with an incoming attack, it's smacking in and hitting the metal rather than cutting into the wood. And if there is a crack from the impact, it's still holding things together, so it's going to last for the rest of the battle. Remember, weapons are a little bit disposable. You will have them repaired or replaced between fights. So you want it to last for the whole fight, and languettes are going to, as a byproduct, are going to help that, even though they're also helping to keep things nice and secure. And of course, on the very bottom, a rondel. Kind of turn so we can see, yeah, a round disc built into that for extra hand protection. And we talked about a rondel dagger, which is here, rondels for protecting the hand. And poleaxe and dagger go very well together, as we'll explain in a little bit. But yeah, extra hand protection. So, the croix, the cross of where things go together, the mail, the head of the weapon, the demi-hache is the middle of the haft, and you notice this is an octagonal design. So, the octagonal design means that it's still thick enough to have really good strength, hold up to a lot of defensive movements. You can deflect, parry, block, beat with the haft, and it's going to take a lot more abuse. Of course, the octagonal shape means that I can actually grip it while still maintaining that thickness. Because if it were edged, even if just thin, it's really awkward. But a quick trip with the router to get this all shaped up, a little bit of stain, got it all ready. And of course, the back end is called the Q. The part for this was not in stock when I ordered the Pollaxe head. So there should be a little cornell, a little prongy thing on the bottom. That's a safety version. On the real one, it would be a bottom spike, and it's called the Q. So, the mail, the demi-hache, the Q. Okay? Now, we'll move the chair out of the way. Stand up in our armor, all nice and jingly. So when we're using the poleaxe, there are two main ways to do guards. There are guards with the dag forward. There are guards with the Q forward. So you could have it over the shoulder, ready to cut, ready to block. You could just thrust if the opponent got too close. Okay, so there are options. Here I am with the dag forward. I can thrust, I can knock aside, and then follow up with a thrust. I can knock aside and follow up with the Q as a thrust. I can knock aside. I can come in and get between the arm and the haft of the opponent's weapon and pull, trying to get the opponent to let go, and then follow up with a thrust. A lot of different movements. There's a lot in there, and a little video like this isn't going to be able to show it all very well. but it's going to give you a good idea that you can see just how big this is. And that's why I call it a medieval multi-tool, because you can cut, you can puncture, you can hammer, you've got good protection, you got an extra spiky bit on the real ones on the bottom. A lot of options for fighting. So it really is a good weapon for fighting in armor. And this is going to be the main knightly weapon of the 15th century. All over Europe, knights are going to go into battle with a poleaxe. Okay? Not very effective using on a horse, but that's why we have the warhammers. That's why we have maces. If you want something that really crunches into armor, but you're fighting from horseback. On foot, we're going to see a lot of poleaxe. And there are poleaxe designs all over. Now, some of them are different, as I mentioned. So if I just grab my warhammer real quick, you can see that it has a beak. So we can imagine that if we put that on there, it's a little small. But if we had a beak, a little curving spike on one side, a hammer, and a top spike, that design was out of stock. It's still out of stock because I wanted to have a synthetic version of that, and then I'd have two different ones to show two different styles, but I don't have that. But we can look at the difference. Look at this. The warhammer can be pretty small. If you're on a horseback and you've got armored soldiers on foot coming towards you, sure, I can attack them, hit them, bonk in the head, kind of give them some concussions, knock them out, get them out of the fight. But on foot, I need to protect myself. Now, of course, I'm very lightly armored by comparison. You know, this is more of a town guard kind of look, and maybe I would have a halberd. Feature for another video. We'll talk about halberd if I ever get that one finished. But yeah, poleaxe. So here I am. So I've got guards with the dag forward. I've got guards with the Q forward, standing in different guards. Now I have to be careful. One thing to keep in mind, when you're fighting in armor, there's no metal on the palms of your hands. It's just leather for the gauntlet. So if you have your hand turned, this is a prime target to kind of scoop up and in and get into the hand. So you always have to watch your hands when you're fighting with the Q, because you don't have that rondel to protect you. Okay? And even if there was a rondel on the very bottom, it's easy enough to get past that it's going to get you in the hand. So I can use the Q forward, or block, follow up with various attacks. But look at this. It's got all the options, all the features. Flip it around, cut, flip it around, percussion, blunt, block, spike, thrust, piercing. There we go. All these options. If we were looking at it from a video game or role-playing game purpose, this has all the options. So there are weapon types. Oh, this is a piercing weapon. This is a slashing weapon. This is a blunt weapon. It's all right here. All in one weapon. And I don't see a lot of use of poleaxes. Halberds are used. But of course, then they only mention that it's a type of weapon, but it doesn't mention the various options. And there are a lot of options. And if you had a back, that curving spike, you can also hook with it, which is awesome. So I can kind of hook with the axe behind. I can kind of get someone's limb in here, but armor, it's going to be a bit thick. It's going to be a little tricky to get in. So that's what a good back spike would do. So if it were a hammer, a spike, and a dagger top, that would be very effective. And that's what we see later in the 15th century, that the axe blade isn't as favored as much. A lot of the plays are going to be featured with a hammer. And they're going to be different designs. Some are going to be multi-pronged, like 3 or 4. Some of them are going to have this waffle design. There's going to be a lot of different features, and there'll be different names for some of them. Lucerne hammer with longer spiky bits, so that no matter which way you hit into the opponent, it's doing something to try and damage that armor, trying to hinder your opponent, trying to get in and attack. Now, it's just a brief look at the poleaxe, the knightly weapon of the 15th century. Often you'll have a dagger as your backup weapon. Maybe it's more on the back rather than the side. But you're fighting, you're attacking. If you drop it, you're getting close with the opponent, too close to use it, you've got the dagger as a backup. But yes, the poleaxe. Whether you spell it P-O-L-L, which means head, and the idea might be that the name came from a long weapon with a hammer for slaughtering animals. You would use the poleaxe to knock them, to kill them very swiftly and humanely. Just a quick hit to the head and knock them out and kill them. Gruesome stuff, I know, but if that's where, the poleaxe, Pollaxe, comes from, that's a theory for it. As far as Poleaxe, well, it makes sense because it's a pole and it's an axe. So pole weapons, pole arms, pole axes, and there are a lot of different pole weapons. Other people have done videos. Now, I will put a link to Pursuing the Knightly Arts. That is a YouTube channel where you can see a lot of fighting done with these synthetic weapons, but in armor and using techniques. They have videos specifically on jeu de la hache, so you can look at this. Treaties from around 1440, they have examples, they'll list information about it. It's a really good channel. Ben and Reese there, they do a great job of reconstructing how you would fight in armor, actual techniques. So it's not just hitting on someone, but there are fluid movements. There's a lot of good stuff there. So I'll put that in the description for the video. I'll link to their channel. Go and give them some views as well. Anyway, thank you so much, friends. Do remember, likes are helpful. Do subscribe, and of course comments. Your comments help shape the content of the channel, so I always appreciate when you have things that you want to know about that I can do videos about in the future. So do take care, stay safe, and stay on guard.